Hello, everybody. Um, so tonight I'm going to be discussing something that has really got people, um, how should I put it, in very fierce arguments towards each other all over the internet. They're making YouTube videos over this. They've been doing it for a long time. And it's about everybody in the Bible is fiction. Everybody's fake. Nobody in the Bible existed. And when I think about this, I can't help but wonder. This is just a cop out. By saying that everybody in the Bible is fake, there's no evidence to support their existence. Now, when someone says that, that's actually a pretty bold claim because I would have to, if I were to believe that, then so I would assume the person telling me that has read and examined all the literature and all the available evidence, or rather, I should say, so-called evidence that supposedly supports the existence of a biblical figure. However, in my research, because I used to heavily get into that, everybody in the Bible is fiction, kind of a extreme mythicism, as I would call it. I saw a lot of evidence to the contrary, and I'm just going to name a couple here. The Zagala Chronicles, which verifies the existence of someone called Adam. Now, the chronology of this historical Adam does not line up with biblical tradition at all. This was just a king of Assyria. When was it? I think it was about 24th century BC, if I remember correctly. Around that time. And he had no children called Cain and Abel. There's not even a myth about this figure, about him being created by God either, for that matter. So this Adam, he shares the same name as the biblical counterpart in Genesis, does not have a story at all. And by the way, in cuneiform, his name is pronounced Adamu. So there's that. We don't see a Cain and Abel anywhere until the 8th century BC. So way off the rails of biblical chronology. And that gets into Romulus and Remus. And I've talked about a lot of times in the past that I think Ares and Yahweh are one and the same God, and I've gave chronological evidence, rather should say chronological etymology to show this to be the case, because I link the astrotheology from Genesis to the Roman god Mars, and I talk about Abel sacrificing a lamb and God is pleased. And all this literature was written during the age of Aries and all that. So all that actually links. Now, the next figure I'm going to talk about is David. A lot of people say there's no evidence for Solomon and David. Well, if someone needs to explain to me why we have something called the Tel Dan Stela. Anyone can look that up right now and read the translation to Tel Dan Stela. In fact, I'm going to do a presentation version of this video. I just haven't gotten around to making presentations yet. So I've been doing these little videos. The viewer just seeing my face and my room in the background. That aside, it does mention the house of David. And even there's another one called the Moabite stone, or also known as the Mesha Stela, which gives validity to the conflict between Mesha and the house of Omri, which is in the can't remember if it's second or first Kings, but I just know it's in the book of Kings, somewhere in there. One of those two books of Kings where it narrates this conflict. And the Mesha Stela and the book of Kings both confirm, they actually corroborate each other, that Israel was defeated by Moab. And in both cases, the god of Moab was accredited. So God got defeated by another god, which is quite humiliating to the Israelites. This guy is supposed to be all powerful, but clearly he's not. Even in Judges 1:19, the Lord gets his ass beat by iron chariots. So that's if he can be defeated by iron chariots, that's pretty bad for a god, I would say. Put that aside. But tell Dan Stila, the Vesha Stila, and the Isagala Chronicles give historicity to several different characters in the Tanakh. Now, aside from that, now I'll move over to Christianity, and eventually I'm going to start I need to start talking about Islam again. I really haven't been talking about Islam enough and its origins. There's a lot to it that I haven't discussed yet, and I will soon enough. But that's for next video, or some other video down the line. But with Christianity, you have a lot of people saying that Jesus is a myth, combination of many gods, and just shoved together and euhemerized into the 1st century. But I don't think it's that simple. One issue I have is that if there was no historical man behind the story of some kind, pro-Roman or not, doesn't matter, then what happened? Did Christianity just come out of thin air? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. But most historians, that doesn't make any sense either. Most historians agree that Jesus existed. The only difference is they don't know how to describe the guy. That's the funny thing. And they all agree that he had to be anti-Roman of some kind, if my memory serves well. But I've shown recently that a historical figure in the 30s AD can be found of a Jesus that was actually very adamantly pro-Roman, and his family even was a vassal of Rome. So there's that. Why would Rome crucify someone that's pro-Roman? It's another thing. If Jesus was pro-Roman, why was he crucified? However, showing the parallel between the Gospel of Luke and the story of Judas the Galilean narrated in the works of Josephus shows that in the comparison between the two, the crucifixion of Judas the Galilean can be deconstructed and shown to have actually happened. And that somebody, actually Josephus, appended the name Judas with Jesus because the Romans don't want him to make Judas the hero that died and rose again. That would be unacceptable. He had to replace him with the name of someone else that was pro-Roman. Henceforth, Josephus, by just doing that, he attributed the story of Judas over to King Basu, so that he had been him. Then we have Tacitus, whom, well, admittedly, he just copied from Josephus, so never mind about him. Tacitus has copied his passage of Jesus from Josephus's Antiquity, so he doesn't count. But in the long run, there's all this evidence, obvious evidence, that somebody was behind the story of Jesus. Now, obviously, the biblical version is totally fiction. The walking on water and turning water into wine, obviously being copied over from other gods, being euhemerized. Preferably Serapis, the celestial Jesus that predated Christianity by 300 years. The worship of Serapis actually shows that Christianity, in a form of fashion, existed before Jesus by 3 centuries, when it was actually founded by Ptolemy Soter in 305 BC. So despite the mix-ups and the convoluted stories and evidence, there is enough evidence within the mess to show that in the end, behind each and every one of these characters, there's always somebody behind the story. It's not completely fiction all the way around, is my point. So that's all I wanted to say.